Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. It's a bit early in the morning here. I mean, it's a winter and very cold, very dark. So it was a bit challenging for me to wake up early in the morning because I normally take a bit late giving some lectures and some online, forums in different parts of the world. But anyway, uh, here I am now. So. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm very much looking forward to share my experience of what I'm teaching, in particular in international human rights course. But I'm specialized in global refugee crisis. So, refugee crisis is one of the most fundamental issues at the moment around the world. So, I'm gonna give you a bit. Statistics and what needs to be done and where we are at the moment. So I frame my topic tackling the global refugee crisis. So I'm going to talk about what refugee is all about. There are three distinctions that people are not aware. What is refugee? What are refugees? What are asylum seekers? And what are migrants? People don't understand the difference. We hear most of the time on different media outlets, oh, these refugees, these migrants, these asylum seekers, what do we really talk about? I want to be specifically define what are all these mean and where are we in 2021 and where we're heading in 2022. So a refugee is a person who is outside their country, has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of five elements. Number one is political opinion. Number two, social group. Number three, nationality. Number four, race. And number five, religion. These are the five elements that the refugee is qualified to be a refugee when he or she leaves her home country and goes somewhere else and is unable to or unwillingly to return home. Once you are outside of your country, you cannot go back for whatever reason, for what five reasons. I mean, most of the time that I have mentioned earlier. So what is refugee? Refugee forced to flee a country due to persecution on the five elements I have mentioned. And what is internal displaced person? Internal displaced person forced to flee but does not cross a border, international border of his or her home country. So internally displaced people, due to climate change or natural disaster, moves from A to B, but within the country itself, not far away from their country. And then what is asylum seeker? Asylum seeker is a refugee who wants to be accepted by a state, who is seeking protection, but no country has determined whether he or she meets the definition of being a refugee. So it's in the process. Asylum seeker means a refugee to be, if you like. That's what it means. And what's migrant? A migrant is a person who moves usually voluntarily. He or she use passport with proper visa and go somewhere as a profession. As a professional to do some professional work, either temporarily or permanently, may or may not cross a border. So that's what migrant is all about. So just let me give you a brief figures at a glance about where forcibly displaced people are at the moment. We have 65.3 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. 65.3 million displaced. That's IDPs, the internally displaced persons. That's the meaning of IDP. IDP is internally displaced person. But I have my own definition of IDPs. It's a bit funny. I call IDPs the international disappointed persons or disappointed people. Why I'm saying this? Because international law does not help IDPs. We don't have international conventions like refugees or migrant rights. IDPs, they are just disappointed. No one protects them, although they're displaced within the country, but they are internationally disappointed people. So that's my definition I gave them. It's not internationally recognized. I mean, it's just when I go everywhere giving lecture, I say this. So we have 65.3 million displaced people, and we have 21.3 million refugees and 10 million stateless people around the world. Most of the refugees come from number one, Syria, number two, Afghanistan, number three, Somalia, number four, South Sudan, number five, Sudan, number five, Democratic Republic of Congo, number six, Central African Republic, number seven, Myanmar, number eight, Eritrea, and number nine, Iraq. So we have 1.2 million refugees need to be resettled from these torn war countries to Europe, America, Australia, New Zealand, or any other countries that would welcome them and give them shelter, food, and protection. And 86% of these refugees hosted by low and middle income countries, unfortunately, and 21.3 million current number of refugees are worldwide. So out of 21.3 million refugees, 1.2 million refugees who need resettlement right now. But then due to the pandemic, no countries have stepped forward to take these refugees. So these refugees are staying or living in one of the most poorest countries in the world. If you see the number of refugees in the world that are welcoming them are Turkey with 2.5 million, huge number. Iran with 979,000 refugees living in Iran. In Pakistan, 1.6 million people are living. In Jordan, very small, tiny country, 2.7 million people are living there. Ethiopia, 736,000 refugees are living. In Kenya, 553,000 refugees living there. Uganda, 477,000 refugees. The DRC, 383,000. Chad, 369,000. Lebanon, very, very small country, has a huge number of refugees than any other country in the world. So what about the most wealthy country like Europe, Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand? Why don't they take their equal shares of welcoming refugees rather than leaving refugees in these tiny countries? So we as a global citizen, as Ariba earlier said, we are a global citizen regardless of where you are from, whether you're from Africa, whether you're from Asia, whether you're from North America or Latin America or anywhere in the world. We are human beings and we have all responsibilities to share, and we have to step up and participate in a global crisis like refugee crisis, like now what we have, COVID, and many more. So if a situation that affects Asia, one way or the other, the African continent would be also affected. We should not say and live, oh, well, let India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka should deal with it, because it's a domino effect. I mean, whatever happened in Asia, with the people in Africa would suffer, and some other countries in Europe would also suffer. So it is interconnected world we are living in. So we should not leave a problem to one country or one state. So I personally believe that some wealthy countries should share the burden of resettling refugees from these poor countries. So what is responsibility sharing? Protect the right of refugees. Distribution mechanisms for resettlement. 10% of refugees by 2022, at least, out of 2.1 million people, we need to resettle at least 300,000. At least. At the moment, we have only 110,000 people have been resettled out of 2.1 million people. It's a joke for me. I mean, when you see the number of 2.1 million people, you have only 110,000 people resettled. And out of these 2.1 million people, 75%, if not 80%, are accommodated by these poor countries. So I plead to the global wealthy countries, although most of us we are here from so-called Asian African countries. I mean, originally, although I live in Spain, well, I always advocate for the Spanish government to resettle more refugees from West Africa because Spain geographically uh, is located I mean, geographical proximity next to West Africa. So a lot of West African refugees take a small boat to travel all the way, within Mediterranean Sea to reach Spain, and Spain always, most of the time, return those boats back to West Africa. As a result, they vanish on the way. So I always advocate. I'm a professor in University of Granada. I teach refugee law, which is international law, specifically human rights law and refugee law. So wherever I go within Spain, I always say Spain should take full responsibility to welcome refugees and take, a fair share burden of the global refugee crisis in the world. So I don't want to take much of your time. I have a lot to talk about refugees, but there are people around here who are waiting their turn to say one or two things better than I do. So I leave the floor to you guys. And thank you very much once again to welcome me.